Okay, this is going to be another impromptu video. I have not written a script for this one. It's going to be about life, death, and everything in between. Because the first video was my near death experience, and when it happened, I didn't know how to convey how my life changed afterwards. But now I pretty much have it under wraps. And it was a hell of a journey, and it's still going on. Because, of course, when people have memories and judgments, they usually hold on to them. Resentments, they usually hold on to them. And I tell you one thing is resentments and judgments over people hold you down by chains more than you would want to actually realize. There's more going on beneath the surface of life, and once you realize that, there's things that drive people to do certain things, and sometimes it gets personal. I mean, in my case, it was really hard not to take it personal, but I had to sit and learn with it anyway. So, about the notion and the topic of death and life. You're born, you die, but everything in between. That is where this world exploits you. But you can also be genuine in that, where you pick up something that you yourself are interested in, and then you try to map that out in a way that makes sense for the future, given whichever country you're in. You use the societal structure, and hopefully it works. In my case, it didn't, and that's what really tested me. But the one thing, yeah, if I've learned anything about life, comfort does not allow growth. Even though you yearn for that stability, um, it's a double edged sword. If you have discomfort, you're pressured, but then there's a different divide between how that manifests. You can either reclude or dig into something, like a passion or something, regardless of if you even have a hope that it's even possible. And that's what I chose to do. Other people, like nowadays, given the internet, life's pressure increases, people can reclude further into the internet or further into distractions than to actually confront life itself, which actually gives life more control over them than they have over life itself. It also makes people very easily emotionally manipulated by ideas, ideologies, um, and people don't have the comprehension of or the conscientiousness to think about how that is going to pan out through time, or how it affects everyone else around them. So the biggest thing about my near-death experience, the change that it did, I lost all the self-judgment I was holding myself down by, because most of it was surmised of society's superego, the supposed ladder you're supposed to subsume to in order to find value, like getting a degree, finding a career, and having all these things. But of course, that constrains you as well, because if you don't have those things, then you're low on the socioeconomic spectrum. It dwindles the possibilities of a lot of things in life, such as families, whatever you value, whatever you're looking at aiming for. All of it gets caught in those binds. Because the one thing in my life was aviation and aerospace. But there was something going on with me that I didn't understand, but of course society gave me a certain label to use to explain what my issue was. And it was just a word. It was Asperger's syndrome. But seeing as to how I was born in a very chaotic home, a very, very, not very, very dysfunctional. It was dysfunctional, but it wasn't outright chaos. It was still chaos nonetheless. But I was no stranger to drug addictions in my family or alcoholism. And children are not adapted to take that. They are not adapted to grow in such an environment. In many cases, when they're shoved into the American education system, that manifests in certain ways, both socially and academically. And of course, the mental health system, rather than addressing the environmental issue, because that's a no-no subject or a no-no area, they cannot interfere with the family. And most families are rather gatekeeping about, well, I know how to raise my kid, but I'm going to go around drinking and sleeping around with everybody in the town. You see where that goes? Not good. And the education system and the mental health system would label these children. I was labeled with autism spectrum disorder. In the 90s, it started with ADHD and then it transferred into autism spectrum or Aspergers. And then, of course, they relabeled it because they wanted to remove the stigma, if you get me on that one. I think that's absolutely hilarious. The stigma from Aspergers to autism spectrum disorder, an even bigger spectrum of things that they label as a neurodivergence, which it is because they've experienced things in life that most possibly haven't, and they can't voice it up or understand what was in their life because everything is touted as normalcy. This is not a normal world. This is a very chaotic, dysfunctional world, and there are many reasons for people to have these behavioral manifestations. And I had that. The school's treatment of that was secluding me, which from kindergarten on through 11th grade delayed or completely inhibited me from being social with others. It made me a very, very quirky, eccentric, highly obsessed individual. I was obsessed with aerospace because I couldn't understand people, because I wasn't able to understand myself. Part of understanding yourself is understanding other people. But I chose to focus on aerospace because it was something more complex, but easily for me to understand because it's right there in front of me. Sort of. But when I was cast out into society, my mother got addicted to heroin. And I was cast out to society to my own will, but also as a result of me wanting to escape my family's reality, of which I did for about 5-6 years. That being said, I tried to get many jobs with aviation. A lot of them were really good, a lot of them were really chaotic, but also I was still a child in the mind. I can rightfully say that until 27 years of age, I was still a child in the mind. I was still curious and still held back because I hadn't experienced the social state of being. That came to me in 2020 in a very weird fashion, too. I lost all hope. I'm not going to dwell on the details about my life in those 5 years. That'll come out later if it needs to. But those 5 years in the cities, I had no friends, basically, essentially. Not to mention, I realized I was nothing more than an exploit or a manipulate or something to manipulate. And it got to the dark points where you're weak and people do things to you that cause traumas, to put it lightly. So, it was 2018, the one thing that I never thought I would ever get to see was a childbirth, but then my mother got pregnant, and I said to myself, I'm just going to stay here long enough to witness her birth and welcome her to whatever the fuck planet this is. I stayed here, I cut her cord, and witnessed her birth, and I held her in that maternity ward, and something in me in that moment changed. It kept me here for a little longer. That became the one chain that pulled me away from the cities, thank God, because that's like a needle in a stack of needles. You're not going to find yourself there. And if you do, it's going to be weird. If not, very dangerous. The best place was a social hive that had never moved in its entire life, because then I could learn what stagnation does to the human mind. In my hometown, most of these people have never left this town. They've stayed here, and they had the comfort of familiarity, meaning they've known these faces for their entire lives. So, in a sense, it felt like a community. To me now, it doesn't really seem like that. It seems like the facade of a community hiding the inner details of what they want, their motives, their agendas, which is the unconscious and the subconscious. I didn't know what I wanted, but I was able to socialize slowly. I had this one link, which was my cousin. Her link allowed me access to the social hive, which slowly I became a part of. And then I even started writing in that, thinking it was as if I was manipulated by their will, because I couldn't express myself fully given all the inexperiences I had. To put it in hindsight and to hammer down the point is in 2020 I had never had an experiences like first kiss or first date even. I was very sexually insecure at that time. But as I started being social, I had my first kiss on in April. A girl I had met in March. I can't remember. But she was my first kiss. And as far as I can tell, she's the only woman that ever saw me for who I was. Um, because she saw me in a moment where I least wanted to be seen. Because once I started being social, I really became more self aware. I knew what I wanted, but I felt that big because I had nothing. I moved back home to run away from the cities. And at that point, I had had several jobs here, but the factories here are just so damn inhuman. And I didn't know myself, so I had my aims, but the realities of it were I was financially strapped, meaning my aims were dead in the water. And emotionally, I did not subsume to that, not one fucking bit. Um, and then I was social throughout 2020. We went on motorcycle rides. With my first kiss as well, we went on a few motorcycle rides, but I was I held myself down by very tight chains of ever going any further. A lot of it was just trying to find myself in this chaos. And the one thing I never wanted to do was to seek a woman just to take on the burden of my issues. If I had issues, I had to figure them out for myself, which is really a catch 22, if you will, because it's psychologically oriented. It's psychologically intertwined in a way that's absolutely frightening. So then I have my motorcycle accident in late July of last year, or not last year, 2020, so 2 years ago. And about a month after that accident, things in my mind started really changing. I lost all my self judgments. It was like a shell had been lifted or a shell had been broken through. I no longer judged myself by chains. I no longer judged myself by what I was, who I was, what I had, or what I didn't have, or who I was with. That reality didn't matter. I was just a human. But in a sense, in society, it's the surface level that you're judged off of, meaning all of that. But losing all of that judgment, and I was just so free to be so happy in those moments after my accident. And I realized I was finally social. I could finally talk to people. And the biggest thing that I realized was that Aspergers was a label, and then it was used to describe every single behavioral issue I had. And a lot of the times it just caused severe emotional dysregulation. Had I been social, had I been in a stable environment, maybe none of that would have happened, but that's not how life works. And nor does mental health or therapy fix it. It can help, but a lot of therapy is simply just what I consider conversational prostitution. You're paying someone to talk to you because you have no one to talk to. Isn't that the saddest reality you've ever heard of? So after that, my life got really weird. I met a girl that I want to say it because it was as equally frightening as it was realistic in my mind at the time. She was my projected anima. If anything, she was my personified anima because once I met her, there was something strange about her that I could keep seeing. Don't mind that. I saw myself in her. I was not looking at her on the surface level, which everyone in this hometown was. I was not looking at her on the surface level. I was looking at her as a human being looking for heaven, basically, but she didn't know what the hell this life was. Nobody really does. They go through the A to B, but they ignore it's actually an A to C, ignore the B. Don't focus on the details, it's just AC. Shut up. I met her, and what was weird about it is I learned that psychological cap I was under was Asperger's, the syndrome, and then I learned what it was. But then after making that realization, after externalizing myself onto another, by seeing her and caring for her state of being, I was very receptive to how people talked about her, portrayed her, or looked at her. And after that, I started learning how people psychologically project. based upon just two people saying certain things about her. Um, and I told her that the second time I ever met her, saying, I'm learning psychological projection. And little did I know, well, no, not little did I know, it was almost like a warning to her to watch out for what people might say about me. Not that I was worried. I just knew that when people realized you changed, they will come up with any dirt they can. If they can't, they'll make it up. And they did. Specifically, one guy did. And that little lie, along with my behavioral changes, me finding my actual state of character because it was delayed that long, because I'd never been social before in my life, everyone started judging me without ever asking me any questions. It was absolutely hell on earth. And it's still so the case, where if I run into anybody that thought they knew me in 2020, they still look at me with eyes of judgment, thinking I'm who they believe I am, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I can't talk to them. I can't explain my side of things. It's a complete just shoved under the rug thing. It's absolutely insane. And I lost my voice after all of that had happened. After the lie was spread, I was socially dispossessed. And slowly in 2022, I'm finally starting to talk to a few people again, but it's not going where I want it to, because I can't bring any of that up. They're still in the same place they were in 2020. I'm way far away from that. I can't even talk to them about the psychological stuff I know, because I can see the circles in their lives and not speak about it, because they'll literally consider me the devil for it. Because we have this idea of freedom, but a lot of it's just self-destruction. What does this have to do with life and death? Because the weirdest thing about my accident was I was confronting life. I felt like if I couldn't do what I simply loved in life, I'd rather be dead. I said that to myself before my accident. And once my accident happened, that's when I started looking at my memory going, holy shit, I did say that. Like, holy shit, I did say that. And it transmuted my obsession with aerospace, because it was already as complex as it could be in my mind, given what I could have at my disposal. But it transmuted into something that was me, like, understanding myself and my mind and what set me out on that path, because I remember confronting my love for aerospace. I was pissed off that I had to fall in love with it, because it just looked like an impossible journey. Which, when you're not social, people have this ability to say, well, you gave up. It's like, when you're not social and you're not properly socialized, that has some rather deep and dark repercussions to your ability to network with people or make your way through society. And that's exactly what occurred. And I knew that it was a very competitive environment. And I was becoming very self-aware of what was in my way. And it wasn't me. It was what was done to me that I didn't know I could actually blame as a problem, but it very much is. You seclude a kid from the entire group, he's not going to be a part of the group, or she. Fact of the matter is, men get diagnosed with it way more than women, and women usually get it way later in life. But the diagnostic regime of Asperger's needs to end. Absolutely. If you've ever known somebody that was diagnosed with it, how does your behavior change when you heard about it? Is it even more compassionate? That's where it starts. Oh, they're just lesser abled. And then that becomes embodied by that child in a literally hellscape reality, and it sets them up for failure. The life death thing, in you, like, I always thought life was linear. That's what the American education system propagates. Go to school, get a career, get a wife, get a home, bam, and then you retire, and then you die because you're dying of boredom. I'll never retire. Now that's essentially the story of 2020. Pardon me, I'm just getting sweaty. I don't know if there's anything else I need to say about it. I've pretty much said everything I could about it. I mean, that story is absolutely ridiculous, and I have a lot more details that I can't go into it as of yet. Let's just say the psychological projection I was under was so dark that people assumed I was out to do her harm, which was not the case in the very least. And I had one guy actually threaten my life for it. I just realized how easy people jump to the first negative thing that's said. It's not pretty. And this is how it works in stagnant social hives, or just people that are insecure and they don't want to understand it or internalize it or accept it. They project that out on the people and their actions, and it's an absolutely flawed logic system. Um, it's what's happened after the digital age just swept over humanity. And luckily, with that, yes, the digital age destroyed us in a certain respect. But given the digital age, it'll also allow us to fix it because now we have communication. People just need to learn to talk to each other again. Oops. I didn't know it was going to end up putting everyone in bubbles. I was made aware of that when I went through what I did. That's why it's kind of everyone has a two-faced personality nowadays. They're one person out in public. They're a complete other person when they're at home in private or with a significant other. And this is not a psychologically healthy society at all. Being aware of it can help. Knowing what to look for can help. And a lot of people don't know what to look for. There's a lot of like self-help things just justify very, very dangerous states of being, I would say. It's the psychological ignorance of these days. They don't really highlight psychology anymore. It's not a common practice. I wouldn't say that. I don't know. But mental health is a very flawed system because they just give you a label and then you assume that's you for the rest of your life without knowing how to grow out of it. The one thing I'm very remiss to say is that psychedelics can help, but do not take that on blind faith, or do like if you're even thinking about it, if you haven't done it yet, you might want to wait for more detail about that because a lot of what's said about them is not true. If there's a psychological missing link in your psyche itself, they have an ability for you to lose what's in your way so that you go and chase it. Or you don't go and chase it, you literally just follow the path that it brings you on. Because it's literally how it happened to me after my motorcycle accident. But it was more of a really screwed up and realistic shamanic experience which involved my death on my motorcycle accident. Through my motorcycle accident, whatever. But I was a very different person before my accident. I was very hidden. I was very insecure. I was very afraid of how people would think of me. When I lost that and I didn't care because I realized I meant nobody any harm, I saw the other side of it. I didn't mean any harm. I can't say that about many people outside of me. I've seen a lot of harm come from this flawed idea of compassion. Because I've had so many people say, I love you, but then I see them stabbing me in the back later on. It's like, oh, you want to take that word back? But double standards. Anyway, I think that surmises this video or finishes it. I don't know. It's very hard to figure out what topic to discuss. I write endlessly about stories in my life, but there's no real place to put it. Sometimes they're very long, sometimes they're very detailed, and nowadays people really don't like reading. I'm just hoping I can figure it out soon because I'm getting tired of this little town. It's kind of like a tesseract. I broke out of one shell and now I'm in a shell of judgment from people that have no idea who I am. So that's all for today. I hope you guys have a great day, and let me know if you have any takeaways from this you'd like me to mention later on. So have a good day.